There are some reports that Microsoft owes nearly $29 billion in taxes. We'll take a closer look at that in today's episode and some other news impacting the overall tech giant. So let's get started. So let's take a closer look at Microsoft. Right now sitting at $332. Year to date, the stock is doing amazing, up 38.75%. The past year, the stock is up roughly 47%. In the past 5 years, the stock is dominating over 203%. And I do believe this kind of showcases that strength that, hey, it's not a bad idea to invest in tech giants, right? Because the company 5 years ago was definitely one of the tops and is still growing and kind of returning great performance to investors. The other thing is, hey, long-term holds shows great opportunities for great companies like Microsoft. So like I mentioned today, what I really want to talk about is the juicy details that we have right now.
Finally, I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
So what I really want to take a closer look at is on October 11th of 2023, which is today, Microsoft Corporation announced the receipt of notices of proposed adjustment, NOPAs, from the IRS for the tax years of 2004 to 2013. The NOPAs were received on September 26th of 2023. So they kind of had this information for about the past 2 weeks, but I guess they needed to kind of look at it first before informing investors. And what's happening here is the IRS is seeking an additional tax payment of $28.9 billion plus penalties and interest as of September 30th, 2023. The company does believe that the allowance for income tax contingencies are adequate. So they mentioned, hey, look, in theory, we don't have to kind of pay anything. We disagree with the proposed adjustment and will contest this NOPAs through IRS Administration Appeals Office and, if necessary, judicial proceedings. Another thing to note is that they do not expect the final resolutions of these issues in the next 12 months. So obviously, I mean, if you get hit with a almost $30 billion with a $30 billion bill in taxes, the first thing you're going to say is, hey, look, my taxes were done properly. Obviously, I don't agree with it. Anyone would say that. The other thing that they do mention is obviously this is going to be a long battle if nothing comes, if no one comes to an agreement. So the company mentions that, hey, look, this is going to take longer than 12 months. And first, obviously, they're going to go with the appealing with the IRS. If the IRS doesn't appeal it or make any adjustments, then obviously they're going to go to more of a judicial proceedings. So we're going to take a closer look at what's going to happen or what are some of the options that can happen from here. But the company did share the blog post. I want to kind of talk about the blog post. And what in the blog post, they kind of showcase a little bit more information here. The blog is called Microsoft on the Issues, an update on our IRS tax audit. And they do mention that, hey, look, the issues raised by the IRS are relevant to the past, but not to their current practices. So like we saw, it was between the years of 2004 and 2013, something that has been in the past due to some of the issues that they were doing. It should not impact anything right now. So that's important to understand. They also mentioned that not reflected in the proposed adjustments are taxes paid by Microsoft under the Tax Cut and Tax Jobs Act, TCJA, which could decrease the final tax owed under the audit by up to $10 billion. Instead of $28.9 billion, the real price could be somewhere around $18.9 billion instead. But Microsoft is saying, hey, look, we have paid over $67 billion in taxes since 2004 in the United States alone. And they actually even go a little bit step further of why this is happening, and they do mention the main disagreement is the way Microsoft allocated profits during the time periods among countries and jurisdictions, right? So they mentioned that this issue is something called cost sharings, and the IRS has actually established regulations that allow companies to kind of do this kind of financial move. And they do mention that many large multinational use cost sharing because it reflects the global nature of their business. Because our subsidiaries share in the cost of developing certain intellectual properties. So under those IRS cost sharing regulations, the subsidiaries were also entitled to the related profits. So overall, it's just Microsoft even let us know, hey, look, this is what's happening. This is what the IRS is contesting. We disagree with it because we are following this with what other multinational companies do as well, and it's called cost sharings. They do mention that, hey, look, we strongly believe that we have acted in accordance with the IRS rules and regulations, and that our position is supported by case law. Like I mentioned, it is important to know that the IRS appeals process will take several years to complete. And if we are unable to come to a direct agreement with the IRS, Microsoft will then have the opportunity to contest any unresolved issues through the courts. So obviously this is going to be a lengthy process, but here I kind of took a closer look at some of the outcomes that can happen. But before we go any further, guys, I also want to say thank you for the support. I think we just hit 28.3 thousand subs in this channel. I'm trying to hit 30,000 by the end of the year. So if you haven't, make sure to hit the thumbs up, the subscribe button. I know this isn't a semiconductor video, but I do have a semiconductor membership program where I do exclusive weekly videos. Click join to learn more. Special offer at fool.com/Jose, free newsletter at josenaharo.substack.com, or free semiconductor news at semiconductorwatch.com. First, right now, Microsoft got this notice from the IRS. The first thing that Microsoft is doing is they are appealing. So what could happen? First, Microsoft wins the appeal. If Microsoft is successful in its appeal, and it could be, right? Maybe the IRS made a mistake somewhere where they weren't kind of implementing the cost sharing, so we're looking at that fully. At the end of the day, a $28.9 billion mistake could be very, in my opinion, can't really be overseen to some extent. But Microsoft can win the appeal, and the company might not have to pay the additional taxes, or might have a pay, or they might notice that, hey, look, it might not be 28.9 billion, it might actually be a lot lower than that. The second thing that could happen is Microsoft loses the IPO. If the IRS Appeals Division upholds the original decisions, they're going to say, hey, look, we didn't make a mistake. Microsoft is going to have to pay that full amount and penalties and interest. But obviously, there's going to be something else that I'll mention there. But the actual amount could also be a lot lower than that 28.9 billion. Like Microsoft stated, right, there is that Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which is roughly $10 billion in taxes already kind of prepaid. So instead of 28.9 billion, it could be maybe closer to 19 billion. Now, what normally happens in things like this is negotiation and settlements. The IRS doesn't want to go to probably, if they are wrong, right, the IRS doesn't necessarily want to go to a legal battle because that's going to be costly. That's going to take forever. Microsoft might also not want to go to a legal battle. Maybe they're both wrong and right at the same time. So instead, what could end up happening is they're going to come up together with a settlement or a negotiation agreement that, hey, look, maybe we were wrong with the 28.9 billion, but you definitely owe more than what you have paid so far. So maybe we meet somewhere in the middle. So that's solution number 3. Solution number 4 is probably going to be the longest of all, is if none of these work, if number 1 doesn't work, if number 3 doesn't work, and if number 2, if Microsoft loses the appeal, Microsoft is most likely going to go to kind of a legal battle with this, and that may take even longer. And at the end of the day is, after that legal battle, what is the judge going to state? And again, they might have to pay more, they might have to pay less, they might just have to pay legal fees. So there's a lot of uncertainties here. In my opinion, I do believe it's probably going to be closer to number 3, where they're going to negotiate and settle. But even if they do that, it's going to take maybe more than 12 months to see. So it is pretty interesting, though, that I would have expected Microsoft's stock price to move a little bit more on this, right? Because a $28 billion bill is no laughing matter, even for a tech giant like Microsoft. But the stock is down roughly 0.58%. I guess most investors understand that something like this will take multiple years. And like I mentioned, there's most likely going to be more of a negotiation and settlement at the end of the day. Just to kind of take a closer look at Microsoft's balance sheet, we do see that Microsoft right now has roughly $87 billion in trailing 12 months of cash flow from operations, and roughly $111 billion of cash and short-term investments available to it. So it wouldn't break the bank for Microsoft, but obviously it would suck. Microsoft right now, let's just end it with a quick valuation. PE ratio of 34, PE ratio forward of 30, PE ratio forward 1 year of 26.27. Microsoft, in my opinion, is one of my top 10 positions in my portfolio. But at these prices, I'm personally not buying. I mean, a PE ratio forward 1 year of 1 year of the mid 20s is not that crazy, but I see kind of more growth opportunities elsewhere. But obviously, right now, I'm not planning on selling any Microsoft shares. Even with this tax news, I do believe, like I mentioned, it's going to be a long process, and it's most likely going to end up in some settlement and agreement between the IRS and Microsoft. So let me know what you guys think. Take care, have a good day, and see you next time.